Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Today we're going to continue with the second video of unit number 6. So in unit number 6 we're talking about everyday things and routines. And transport is something that it's present in every single day of most of our lives, all right? So we're going to be talking about some means of transportation. We're going to be asking how to get to places and saying how you go to work or to school, or in this case, maybe university. So, the first part of the lesson is about vocabulary. So, we have some images about different means of transportation. And so, what I want you to do is to look at the images and try to match them with the words that we have here. We have the word train, taxi, bus, the underground, or also called metro, boat, plane, and tram. So pause the video and match the words to the images. Now let's listen to check.
Track 5. A,
boat,
B, tram. C,
taxi,
D, plane. E,
bus,
F, underground. G,
train,
Very good. So try to think also of the difference between, for example, trams and buses, right? These are electric ones. And then we have the underground, right? That goes below the ground, of course. And then we have a regular train. Now let's continue. This activity is called Two Cities. So look at the pictures of London and Istanbul. What can you see in them? So here we have two pictures of London, England. What can you see here? What is this? This is the underground, right? And here we have an underground station. Then in the next image, we have a street, of course, a taxi, and a bus, right? Very good. And now here in Istanbul, we have a taxi as well. At the back, we have a mosque. And here we have a boat, or also called ferry, right? And we also have a mosque at the back of the image. Now read the sentences. Do you think they are about London or Istanbul by looking at these images? 1. You can go everywhere by underground. London or Istanbul? You can go to many places by boat. There are lots of taxis. They're not too expensive. You can go by taxi, but it's very expensive. There are no trams, but there are buses. So let's listen and check your guesses.
Track 6.
London,
In London, you can go everywhere by underground. It's very fast and quite expensive. There are taxis, and they are very expensive. There are no trams, but there are buses. The buses are slow, but it's a really good way to see the city.
Istanbul,
The buses are cheap, but they're quite slow. There are lots of taxis, and they're not too expensive. And you can go to many places in Istanbul by boat. The boats are very good, and they're cheap too.
So let's see. Remember that if you need to listen again, you can pause the video and go back. So number 1 says you can go everywhere by underground. That is London, right? Number 2 says you can go to many places by boat. That would be Istanbul, right? There are lots of taxis. They are not too expensive. That's Istanbul. You can go by taxi, but it's very expensive. London, and there are no trams, but there are buses. That is London as well. Very good. Pay attention to the expression go by. We can say go by bus, go by car, go by boat, go by trams, right? But we don't say go by the bus or go by the car. We say only go by car. Good. Now, let's see. Practice, listen and practice saying these sentences. So this is part of the last unit we saw. There is and there are for the things that exist or don't exist. There is a metro, singular. There are lots of taxis. Yes? And we also have the expression you can to talk about the possibilities you have in a town. So we say you can go by underground or you can go by boat. Think about Viña del Mar and Valparaíso, right? And try to think of the possibilities of means of transport you can use. You can go by underground or metro. You can go by buses or by bus. You can go by taxi. You can go by boat. No, right? We don't have buses. So there aren't any boats in this case. Now, if you pay attention, here we use the noun, right? Only the noun, singular or plural. And here we have the expression with a preposition. Go by underground. Now, here we have these sentences. And what I want you to do is to pause the video and add there is or there are, or you can to the sentences. So, for example, number 1 says, in New York, lots of taxis. The correct sentence would be, in New York, there are lots of taxis, plural, right? So pause the video and do the rest because I'm going to give you the answers in a second. Are you ready? So number 2, in Tokyo, you can go everywhere by metro. You can go everywhere by metro. In Bogota, there are buses and taxis, but no trams. There are buses and taxis, but no trams. 4. In Shanghai, you can go by boat. You can go by boat. In Cairo, there is a new underground. There is a new underground. In London, you can go by train to the airport. Do you have them all correct? Very good. Now, we're going to be talking about people talking about some places, right? And especially about transport in those places. And they're going to be using these words. Cheap, expensive, which is the opposite of cheap, fast, slow, and good. So you're going to complete these sentences with the information that you hear in the listening. All right? So let's see.
Track 6.
London.
In London, you can go everywhere by underground. It's very fast and quite expensive. There are taxis, and they are very expensive. There are no trams, but there are buses. The buses are slow, but it's a really good way to see the city.
Istanbul.
The buses are cheap, but they're quite slow. There are lots of taxis, and they're not too expensive. And you can go to many places in Istanbul by boat. The boats are very good, and they're cheap too.
Okay, so let's see. We have number 1. The London Underground is fast and also expensive, right? Fast and expensive. Taxis in London are expensive as well. Very good. And buses in London are slow. Very good. Taxis in Istanbul are cheap. Buses in Istanbul are cheap and slow, right? And boats in Istanbul are cheap and good. Very good. Now think about the town where you live and try to write 3 or 4 sentences about transport. Maybe you can follow the same examples and use the word cheap, expensive, fast, slow, and good in general, right? You can show me your sentences next time we see it at an online meeting. So let's continue. Now, we're going to be now talking about how to ask for directions in this case, or how we can get to different places. So we're going to listen to a conversation, right? And you're going to identify where does the women want to go and what is the answer. So here we have some examples. We have, of course, excuse me, and then we have how can I get to, and then we include the name of the place we want to get, right? And then you can, and the expression go by the mean of transport that is chosen, right? So let's listen and try to complete these 2 sentences.
Track 8.
Excuse me, how can I get to the airport?
Track 8.
Excuse me, how can I get to the airport?
Well, you can go by train or by taxi.
Okay, so the question was, excuse me, how can I get to the airport? Well, you can go by train or by taxi, right? By train or by taxi. Now, practice the same structure, but now with these words. So you create the question and then you create the answer with what you have here in parentheses. So let's see. For number 1, we have, how can I get to the town center? You can go by tram or by underground. You can go by tram or underground. How can I get to Paris? You can go by train, plane, or bus. Here we have options, right? Train, plane, or bus. How can I get to Oxford? You can go by train or by bus. How can I get to Malta? You can go by plane or boat. Yes? Very good. Now try to write questions about places in this town and in another town, right? So here we have some examples. How can I get to the Hilton Hotel? We can use it for very specific places or also for cities like Moscow. Now let's continue. Here we have images about means of transport that people use to go to work and school as well, right? So for when you go to work or when you go to university, there are some specific means of transport that we use, right? We don't use, usually, we don't go by boats, right? That's something very uncommon, or go by plane, right? So here we have some common ways of transport that we use to go to these places. So, what do we have in image A? We say walk, right? Walk. We don't say go by walk. No, we just say we walk. For B, we have 2 options. Go by bike, and then we use the mean of transport, or the verb cycle. Cycle. Yes? Both are correct. We don't say go by cycle or bike, right? We have the expression and the verb. And then for C, we have go by car or drive. Those are the 2 options. Now let's listen to 4 people talking about the means of transport they use to go to these places. So underline the correct words for each case. All right?
Track 9.
Donna.
I usually cycle to work. If the weather's bad, I go by bus. Sometimes I go by underground, but it's expensive.
Olga.
I live near my office, so I usually walk to work or I go by bus. I never drive.
Ben.
Well, I work in the next town, so I always go by car. I never go by bus, it's too slow.
Emma.
I work in the city, but I live in a small village, so I go by train. I walk to the station and then I get the train into the city. It's about an hour.
Okay, so remember that if you need to listen again, you can pause the video and go back. So first we have Donna, right? So Donna says that she usually cycles, right, or go by bike, right? And she also goes by bus. Remember that when we talk about he, she, or it, we say goes, cycles, right, or drives, because we're talking about third person singular. Olga says that she always walk, right? Or sometimes she goes by bus, right? Ben doesn't live near his work, so he usually goes by car. That means that he drives, right? And finally, Emma always combines two means of transport because she walks to the train station and then she goes by train. She says that it takes her an hour to get to work, right? Now, try to identify where do they work. So we're going to listen again and we're going to pay attention to the place where they work. All right?
Track 9.
Donna.
I usually cycle to work. If the weather's bad, I go by bus. Sometimes I go by underground, but it's expensive.
Olga.
I live near my office, so I usually walk to work or I go by bus. I never drive.
Ben.
Well, I work in the next town, so I always go by car. I never go by bus, it's too slow.
Emma.
I work in the city, but I live in a small village, so I go by train. I walk to the station and then I get the train into the city. It's about an hour.
Okay, so for Donna, we don't have a lot of information about where they work, right? Olga says that she lives near the office. So we know that she works in an office. Ben says that he works in the next town. So he doesn't work in the same town as he lives. And Emma works in the city and she lives in a village, right? So she has to walk and then go by train. Very good. Now, final activity, try to write sentences about you. How do you go to work or school or university? So remember that when we talk about routines, we use adverbs of frequency. So talk about the things that you always do, usually, sometimes, and never, right? So for example, I work in a lot of different campus of university. So I always drive, right? Because sometimes I have to work in Curauma or in Valparaíso or in Recreo, right? So I always drive. Sometimes I take the underground. So I drive to the station, then I leave my car there, and then I go by underground. I never go by bus because it is very slow, right? And the traffic is terrible. So if I'm in a hurry, I cannot get late to the class, right? Because I'm the teacher, of course. So I never go by bus. I sometimes go by underground and I always drive. Now, what about you? Okay, so that is the end of today's lesson. Remember to write me at my email in case you have any question. This is the last unit before our big test. So don't take your doubts to yourself. You can write me if you want to clarify something. And I will see you very soon in another video probably. All right? So take care. Bye bye.